So, let's cover some advanced driving strategies I use in Wreckfest. Let's start with clutch manual. This is significantly faster to use than manual or automatic, and it is much easier to learn if you have played using manual gears before. First, I'm going to cover why it's faster though. There are two main methods of shifting, ignoring sequential gears because they aren't in Wreckfest. The two methods of shifting are to decelerate, clutch in, change gear, release clutch, power, and the other method of shifting is to keep the power on, clutch in, still applying the power, shift, still on the power, release the clutch, still on the power of course. This is called a flat shift. Typically you wouldn't want to do this in a real car, or at least old ones, and to an extent modern ones, as it can cause the engine to over-rev as you clutch in while holding the accelerator down, and then as you release the clutch in a heavier gear, it can cause over-torquing, which can destroy the engine quite easily. But in Wreckfest this isn't a problem. It may be with the extreme damage setting, but I don't know that for certain, and I've not had a problem with it yet. So you can essentially flat shift everywhere. And when you release the clutch, those excess revs and excess torque engaged by the clutch at the higher gear will torque the engine a lot. As I mentioned before, that's what destroys the engines, but in Wreckfest it doesn't destroy the engine, so it causes the car to jerk forwards and give you about 2 to 3 miles an hour of extra speed. This is why I seem so much faster than other players off the line, but if you compare me to another player who uses manual with clutch, we are far more equal. So learning to use clutch manual will help you significantly, and it only takes a couple of hours to learn effectively. The next thing I would focus on learning is how other players drive. Being a mod in the server I play most often, it has its advantages and its disadvantages. On the one hand, it means that players are usually more passive with me. They don't want to accidentally spin me or do something I might think is bad or against the rules. The reality is I don't really kick people who crash me out often because I can't necessarily tell their exact situation and what's going on. If I can't get out of the way of a shitty situation, that's down to me to do something about it, not down to the players to get out of my way. The disadvantage to this is that players, they may not, shall we say, behave genuinely around me. What you want to do though is find a better racer than you and chase them. Make it your objective to, at some point in the race, or the next race, or the race after that, get a clean overtake on them and leave them behind ideally, or just defend from them. Just keep in front. We can do this by braking ever so slightly later than them into corners, given that we come into the corner wider or at the same place as them of course. Remember, if you're coming up to a left-hand turn and you're on the far left-hand side of the track, suddenly jumping to the right-hand side of the track where the player you're chasing's line is no better of a situation than you would be just going straight on your line. Those extra few degrees where you're going to be facing to the right are going to ruin your corner a lot of the time. In fact, no, all of the time. Something about fast is smooth and smooth is slow. No, slow is slow, smooth is fast, whatever. While racing, you'll notice that the majority of my overtakes are not clean overtakes. And by that I don't mean that I corner bomb the player, I just mean that I cut inside of them and use them to get around the corner as best I can. An undertake. Doing proper overtakes in Wreckfest, at least in C-Class, is very hard at the best of times. Just a quick aside, do be careful when cutting inside of players, especially particularly fast ones, as they regularly drive around corners as quickly as is possible for their car. They're on the ragged edge, so to speak. It's quite easy to crash them out when players are driving like this, and then they're probably going to be quite aggressive with you, and what with them potentially being a faster player, it's not going to be fun to be on the receiving end of. Remember, if you're on the outside of the turn coming into the corner, your line is better than theirs, so if you brake earlier, you can theoretically cut inside and get past them in the corner fairly quickly. When behind a group of players like you see here, you have what I like to call a control zone. It's not really a control zone in the sense that I'm controlling the fight in front of me, but it's more that I can pick and choose where to pass or if I should pass or not. I can pick a time when the pack is going slow and go through quicker than them. Be careful though, don't get caught up in this pack. It will be a lot slower and it's often hard to get out again as players are now actively fighting you. Good players will instinctively block players trying to get past and doing strategies like this, so try to know who you're racing with. Try to focus on knowing the consistency of the player you're fighting. This is hard, of course, but it's possible by all means. You'll get a sense of this as you watch how they drive and how they react around you. Do they often overcommit into a corner? Do they use all the track? What do they do with other players around them? If they aren't too consistent of a player, it's probably a bad idea to try and copy their lines into a corner. It's better to follow them and then take a better, wider or faster line when they're slow in the middle of a turn. A good example of a very aggressive player would be the yellow boomer I passed last lap. He was attacking me constantly and he was actually doing quite a good job of slowing me down. A good example of a player who can defend well would be Hakuro in front of me in the white TriStar. I've got a video linked in the description where him, me and a player called Hines get into a three-way duel on alt-route reverse. It's well worth a watch for some fast and very semi-clean racing. Watch how, coming onto the straight, he pushes the hammerhead to the left side of the track, inadvertently opening up a chance for me to pass him, but also making the lines of the far more agile hammerhead far worse, bettering himself, and then how he defends against me by going wider coming into the first turn, forcing me to decelerate as not to spin him. A shift up while in the air, this is quite a good thing to do as it gets the wheels spinning much faster as the engine doesn't have any friction from the surface to slow it down, making my wheels spin faster, boosting me when I land. Typically I won't do this on a jump where I have to take a corner, because the corner will slow me down and I prefer to have the extra revs rather than the torque. Next I want to cover line choice. I said earlier in the video smooth is fast, but just going outside, inside, outside on every corner is not the way to drive. Partly because you won't be able to do that all the time, but mainly because it's not always the fastest thing to do. Let's take the first corner on S-pedal and short reverse. This corner is quite a pain to do, but if we follow the outside, inside, outside rule that I often refer to, well, this happens. Let's compare that to a slightly tighter line. While it is undeniable which looks better, it's clear that the straighter line through those turns is significantly faster. The speeds of those two clips haven't been edited at all, that is the actual difference, and it really speaks into how important flow of your line choice is. Essentially how smooth of a line you can take on the track. If you look at any real racetrack where there is tyre marks showing the typical lines that the drivers take, you'll never find them suddenly swerving across the track, or not using all the track where it's possible, for this very reason. So these are the generally accepted basics of advanced driving in Wreckfest. So far, so simple, right? Well, as things get more advanced in terms of speed, one of these points becomes far more important than any of the others. Any guesses? That's right, line choice. It is the single most important thing that you can learn, pretty much above all else, and this video has been an elaborate scheme just to get to talk about it. So, as we covered, going outside, inside, outside through corners is good, but it's not something that you should do 100% of the time. Use it as a basis of how you're going to go around the track, and then adjust depending on the corner, players around you, stuff like that. Once you're doing this, the next most important thing to do is just relax. Take that Hammerhead RS who I pointed out, who was cracking under stress, for example. For sure, when you need to get past a back marker or something like that, it is worth a little bit of pucker. But they probably won't be doing a better line than you, or, well, you wouldn't be lapping them to begin with now, would you? Wait. This is an advanced driving video, isn't it? I should be showing you all of the little hints and tricks to cutting tens of seconds off your lap, the rough and gnarly shit. What's the secret? There is no secret. Seriously, there's none. Everything I've mentioned is, well, exactly what the fastest players do. They're just going faster and they can maintain better momentum because of that. Of course, they don't overcommit into corners, but they learn braking points, if they can be bothered to. S-Pedalen has yard markers for braking points, but generally I can't be bothered to learn the braking points perfectly, and my consistency suffers because of it. The hardest thing
to do is just these basic techniques, but not overcommitting. Say, braking a few inches later than you did last lap, even when your brain is saying, screw that, I spun last time I went that fast into this corner. So when don't you want to be using stuff like outside, inside, outside? Well, it's quite hard when you're in the inside of a corner and there's a car on your outside, but as we mentioned before, we can use them to get around the corner. It's not the fastest, but it'll get us around and it won't let him ahead. We're going to let you watch the rest of this race. Pay attention to how me and Evergreen fight each other. Evergreen, by the way, is, well, shall we say, one of the fastest players in the game. On the track we're driving on now, he holds the fastest time in a front-wheel drive car, and he's top 10 on more tracks than I'm top 100 in. What did I do in that race that I didn't tell you about? I went outside, inside, outside. I defended players by keeping them on my outside. I cut inside of players to overtake. I know what Evergreen's strategies are for overtaking me. He'll get out of my vision so I can't move to block him, and then he'll try to rush past. So to counter that, I put myself in as awkward of a position as possible for him, and it seemed to work. I didn't change gear with the terrain, granted, but while there wasn't really enough terrain to change gear with. But seriously, that's all it is. I do the exact same driving as the dogshit Lola Gremlin the guy was complaining about in chat. Well, okay, he probably doesn't use clutch manual, but I've just tightened down my technique. It's those few basic principles. But remember one thing, none of the 4 things I've mentioned earlier will make you a good driver if your lines are bad. Sorry this video is so, shall we say, underwhelming, but it's true. Just tighten down those basic principles and you'll get there, eventually. I'm going to leave you with this race. Give it a watch, try to pay attention to what I do and how I drive. Hopefully this video has been useful for you, or at the very least enlightening. If you've got any questions at all, throw them into the comments. Videos where lots of people comment seem to do better. Thanks, algorithm.